Hey, this is the Truth Hunter channel where we share real stories with unexpected twists. If you enjoy the video, make sure to subscribe and give it a like. It really helps our channel grow. Now let's dive into the story. My name's Nick. I'm 26, live just outside of Denver, and I work as a freelance web developer. Nothing too exciting. I've known Alex, my best friend, since high school. He's like a brother to me. And his mom, Mrs. Garner, well, she was just Alex's mom. Always polite, always composed. She'd offer us snacks after school, remind us not to slam the doors. That kind of mom. A couple weeks ago, Alex texted me saying he was heading to Hawaii for 10 days with his girlfriend. I was like, man, you lucky, but before I could hit send, he added, hey, my mom might ask for some help with stuff while I'm gone. She's been moving things around the house. If you're around, could you swing by? Sure. No big deal. I messaged her a couple of days later. Hey, Mrs. Garner, Alex mentioned you might need a hand with something. She replied pretty quickly. Hi, Nick. If you're free, I could use help with the hallway cabinet. It's too heavy for me. Let me know. That was it. Straight to the point. Very her. I pulled up to her house on a Tuesday around noon. It felt weird being there without Alex. Same driveway, same porch, just quiet. When she opened the door, I'll admit I was caught off guard. She looked different, not in a dramatic way. Just more put together. A bit thinner than I remembered, hair tied back neatly, wearing this soft beige sweater and jeans. She looked tired but elegant. Graceful even. Hi, Nick, she said. Her smile was polite but faint. Come in. We moved the cabinet, some old oak thing, from the hallway to the guest room. It took 20 minutes, tops. After that, I figured I'd head out, but as I turned to grab my keys, she asked, would you like a coffee before you go? I hesitated. I hadn't really expected to stay, but something in her voice, soft, maybe even a little hopeful, made me say yes. We sat at the kitchen table. I'd been there 1,000 times, but never like this. She made us coffee and we talked, not small talk either. She asked about my work, if I was still seeing anyone, what I thought about living alone. I don't know why, but I opened up more than I usually do, and she did too. At one point, she looked out the window and said, almost to herself, this house feels too big sometimes. Too quiet. There was a pause. I wasn't sure what to say. So I asked, do you ever think about moving? She shook her head. No. It's not the house. It's me. I don't know. I'm still adjusting to not being needed all the time. There was something in the way she said it, like the words had been sitting inside her for a long time. Then she looked at me and smiled. Thank you for helping today, Nick. Really? That smile lingered. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see her as just Alex's mom. I saw her. The next morning, around 9:30, my phone buzzed while I was drinking coffee at my desk. I figured it was a client, but when I looked, it was her, Mrs. Garner. Hey, Nick. I found some old photo albums while cleaning the attic. Thought they might make you laugh. If you're free later, stop by. I stared at the message for a few seconds longer than I should have. I wasn't sure what to make of it. It was casual, but not exactly. Not the kind of text you send just anyone. She didn't usually reach out like that. But then again, yesterday had been different too. She'd opened up a little, and so had I. Maybe that's all it was. I thought about it for a bit, then typed back. Sure. Around 2, her reply came almost instantly. Perfect. At 2 o'clock, I pulled into the same driveway I'd parked in dozens of times before, but now I was hyper aware of how quiet the street was. No Alex. No noise, just me and her. She opened the door before I even rang the bell. She was wearing this deep blue button-up blouse and light jeans. Nothing fancy, but she looked, well, beautiful. There was no denying it. Natural. At ease. Come in, she said with a warm smile, stepping aside. On the living room coffee table, there were 3 thick albums stacked neatly. I sat down on the couch as she picked up the first one and opened it on her lap. These might embarrass Alex if he knew I showed them to you, she said with a small laugh. One by one, she flipped through the pages. Baby pictures, school portraits, random snapshots. Some were silly. Others were so old they were starting to fade. I found myself laughing at the ones of Alex wearing oversized glasses or crying during a haircut. We were both laughing, actually, but in between the laughs, she started telling me the stories behind the photos. She talked about raising him alone. About the sacrifices. She wasn't complaining. Just reflecting. There was something honest in her voice, almost like she was remembering pieces of herself she'd buried. I worked 3 jobs the year he turned 9, she said, pausing on a photo of a birthday cake. I remember baking the cake at midnight. I was exhausted, but I didn't want him to think I forgot. She smiled at the photo, but her eyes looked far away. Then came the silence. I didn't break it. I could feel something shifting in the room. Finally, she said, sometimes I wonder who I would have become if I hadn't spent every ounce of myself raising someone else. She glanced up at me like she was worried she'd said too much. It's not regret, she added quickly. I love my son more than anything, but I never really had a chance to live just for me. She stood up and walked into the kitchen, saying something about tea. I followed her, unsure of what to say. At the counter, she kept her back to me as the kettle heated. Then, without turning around, she said, I know it sounds selfish, but I want to feel something again. I want to laugh without guilt, dance without a reason. Just be me. I stood there unsure, not of her, but of myself. Finally, she turned around. Looked at me. Her voice was quieter now. You're the only one I've said this to. You're not family, but you're not just some guy. You're someone who listens. Someone who sees me. I swallowed hard. I didn't expect this. Then she asked, softly but clearly, would you go out with me one night? Not a date. Just help me feel normal again. It wasn't even a hard decision. I just nodded. Yeah, I said, tell me when. And in that moment, she looked younger than I'd ever seen her. Like a piece of her had come back to life. The next few days felt like they passed in a blur. Work was busy, but my mind kept circling back to what Mrs. Garner had said. The requests she made, asking me to go out with her, kept replaying in my head. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just her reaching out to a friend for some company. After all, she had been through so much raising Alex on her own. A night out was probably just what she needed, right? But I couldn't deny that the whole thing felt off. I'd spent a lot of time at her house over the years, but it had always been with Alex around. There was a certain boundary, a natural distance between us. Now she was asking me to cross it. She texted me the night before. Nick, how about Friday? Dinner at 7? I read the message a few times. Friday seemed so soon. I still hadn't fully processed the conversation we'd had. But she seemed excited. She was waiting for my answer and I couldn't leave her hanging. Sounds good. I typed back, my fingers almost shaking. The next day, I found myself at her door, a little nervous. She opened it with that same warm smile. But this time, there was something different about the way she looked at me. Almost expectant, ready for an adventure, she said, her voice light. It was different the way she spoke. There was a playful edge to it, something I hadn't heard from her before. She was dressed in a simple black dress, her hair styled in soft waves, looking elegant without trying too hard. She didn't look like the woman I'd known as Alex's mom. She looked like someone else, someone I'd never met. We drove to a small local restaurant, one of those places with low lights and candles on the tables. It wasn't fancy, but it had an intimate vibe to it. As we sat down, the conversation came easily, almost too easily. She was relaxed, not the woman I remembered from before, always busy with housework and errands. She was someone new. So, how's work? She asked as she sipped her wine, looking at me with genuine curiosity. Good, busy but good. I said, try not to sound too awkward. We talked about everything and nothing. She asked about my family, how I liked living on my own, the usual things people ask when they don't know where to start. But it wasn't the questions that caught me off guard. It was the way she looked at me. She didn't seem like she was just making conversation. She seemed like she really wanted to know me. As the night went on, I started to feel like I was looking at her differently. I noticed the way she smiled when she laughed, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her memories of raising Alex, the way she paused for a moment before sharing something personal. I don't do this often, she said, her voice quieter now. I don't go out. I never really did. I was always busy, taking care of Alex, making sure everything was right. I didn't have time for me. There was a heaviness in her words, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't regret, but a sort of longing. She was reminiscing about the life she hadn't lived, a life she put aside for everyone else. I get that, I said, trying to keep the tone light, but I couldn't ignore the sincerity in her voice. We finished dinner, and as we walked out of the restaurant, she touched my arm lightly. It wasn't something casual. There was meaning behind it. I needed this tonight, Nick, she said softly. More than I thought I did. Her eyes locked with mine, and for a brief second, I felt that pull again, stronger than before. She was right there, standing in front of me, not just as Alex's mom, but as herself. A woman who had her own hopes, dreams, and apparently regrets. I didn't know what to say. How could I? She gave me a small, almost shy smile, and we both walked to the car. As I drove her back to her house, the atmosphere was different. The air felt heavier, charged with something unspoken, something I couldn't ignore. When we got to her house, I parked the car. She didn't immediately get out. Instead, she turned toward me, and for a second, it felt like time stood still. "Thank for tonight," she said softly. Her voice was gentle, but there was something deeper there. Something vulnerable. "You're welcome," I replied, not knowing what else to say. We both sat there for a moment, just looking at each other. Neither of us made a move to leave. I didn't know if I was supposed to kiss her, or if she wanted me to, but the tension in the car was undeniable. Then she finally spoke. "I'll see you tomorrow, Nick," she said, her voice steady again, as though she was regaining her composure. I nodded and got out of the car, walking around to her side to open the door. As she stepped out, she gave me another soft smile, and for a second, I could have sworn there was something else in her eyes. Something unspoken. I drove home that night with a million thoughts swirling in my head. She had been different, and so had I. What did it mean? What was happening? I didn't know, but one thing was clear. This night had changed something, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. It had been a few days since our night out, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I saw her, I felt that same mix of confusion and longing. What was this? Was I being too caught up in something that wasn't there? Or was there really something more beneath the surface? I had spent so much of my life seeing her as just Alex's mom. Now she was something else. The way she looked at me, the way she spoke, like there was an entirely different side of her that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just the mom I had known all these years. It was like she was showing me a side of her that had been hidden away for far too long. But what did that mean for me? I wasn't even sure what I wanted. I had never thought about her like this before. Yet here I was, feeling a connection that didn't seem to make sense. The text came in the afternoon, just as I was finishing up a project. "Hey, Nick, I'm thinking about getting out of the house tomorrow. Want to go to that new bar downtown? It'll be fun." I hesitated before replying. A part of me wanted to say no, to pull away and not risk crossing any boundaries. But then I thought about the last time we hung out. It hadn't felt forced. We had a good time, so why not? "Sure, sound good. What time? How about 7? It was strange, but I couldn't deny the anticipation I felt. I kept telling myself it wasn't anything more than a night out between two people who had known each other for years. But as the clock ticked closer to 7, I realized I was more nervous than I'd ever been before. When I knocked on the door, she answered almost immediately. This time, she was wearing a deep red dress that made her look even younger than she was. Her hair was styled, and she had a subtle but confident smile. "You look great," I said before I even realized I'd spoken. She smiled, and there was that little sparkle in her eyes again, that hint of something else. "Thanks," she said softly. "You're not so bad yourself." We walked out to the car in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a certain ease between us now, something I hadn't expected. The drive downtown felt different too. The air was thicker, like we were both on the edge of something we couldn't take back. When we arrived at the bar, it was small but had a nice vibe, low lighting, soft music. We sat at the bar, ordered drinks, and before I knew it, the conversation was flowing like we'd known each other for years. She laughed at my jokes, and I found myself laughing at hers. It felt effortless. "Nick," she said, pausing after a sip of her wine. "You know, I don't usually do this. I don't even remember the last time I went out like this." "I know," I said, "but I'm glad you did." She smiled a little more softly this time. "I'm glad you came with me," she replied. I was trying to keep things light, but I felt this weight hanging in the air. Something unspoken, something we were both avoiding. The way she looked at me was different now. It wasn't just friendly anymore. "Do you ever feel like you missed out on something?" she asked suddenly. I wasn't sure how to answer. I had my own regrets, sure, but this wasn't about me. It was about her, and I knew it. "I don't know," I said slowly. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes. Like there's something they could have done differently." She looked down at her drink, swirling it gently. Then she looked up, locking eyes with me. "I always put everyone else first," she said quietly. "Alex, my work, everything." But now she trailed off. There was a moment of silence, and for a second I wondered if this was where it was going to happen, if she was going to say something more. But she didn't. Instead, she just gave me that smile again, the same smile she'd given me the other night. But this time I wasn't sure what it meant. "You're not the only one who feels like you've missed out on something," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. She tilted her head, studying me. There was a long pause before she spoke. "I'm sorry if this is awkward, Nick," she said, looking down again. I don't know. Sometimes I feel so alone in all of this. I never thought I'd be here. You know? I never thought I'd be out with someone like you, feeling like I'm still trying to figure out who I am. I didn't know what to say to that. There was a weight in her voice that I couldn't ignore, something raw and vulnerable. I'm not going anywhere, I said softly. I'm here. You're not alone. And as I said those words, I realized something. I meant them. I was here, and for whatever reason, I wasn't ready to walk away from this. But as the night went on, I couldn't help but feel that the boundaries we'd once had were beginning to blur. Maybe I was crossing a line I didn't fully understand, but at that moment, I didn't care. There was something between us. And no matter how much I tried to deny it, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I sat in my car outside her house, hands gripping the steering wheel. The days had passed since everything between us had changed. At first, I thought it was a mistake, something that shouldn't have happened. But now, as I sat there, I realized that what we had, it was different. I couldn't explain it. And I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew that we had both crossed a line. And now, we had to decide what to do about it. I texted her, "Can we talk?" Her response came quickly. Of course, come in. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked to the front door. She opened it before I could even knock, her smile warm but with a hint of something deeper, something that matched the way I felt. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, but I could hear the tension behind it. I followed her inside, the quiet between us almost palpable, the weight of everything we had shared hung in the air. As soon as we were seated, she turned to me, her eyes searching mine, trying to read me the same way I was reading her. We both knew we couldn't keep doing this. "Nick," she started, her voice low, "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I think we both know where this is heading." She paused, searching for the right words. "I can't do this anymore. Not like this." I knew exactly what she meant. We couldn't continue living in this limbo. The connection between us was undeniable, but it wasn't something that could ever come to light. It wasn't fair to either of us. We both had to let go of what was never meant to be anything more than a secret, something shared between the two of us, and no one else. "I agree," I said softly. "I've been thinking the same thing. This whatever it is, it can't be anything more. We can't tell anyone. We can't let this get out." Her eyes softened and she nodded, looking relieved. "I don't want anyone to know. Not because I'm ashamed," she continued, her voice trembling, "but because I know that what we have is ours. It's private. It's ours to keep. It's a secret that no one else can take from us." I leaned back in the chair, processing her words. She was right. This wasn't about guilt or fear. It was about understanding that what had happened was something precious, even if it was something that had to be hidden. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be no happily ever after, no grand gesture. But there is something real, something that no one else would ever understand. "I don't want to lose what we have," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I know we have to keep it this way, in the shadows. No one else can know." She reached out, gently touching my hand. "We'll keep it between us, and I'll be okay with that. I'll always remember what we shared, even if it's just ours to remember." There was a quiet comfort in the way she spoke. It was the same feeling I had. I didn't want to let go of this, not entirely. But it was clear that we couldn't go back to how things had been. This was a chapter that had come to an end, but not in a way that left me broken. We both had our lives to live, but we had shared something that couldn't be undone. We stood up and she hugged me, her arms tight around me for just a moment longer than I expected. There was nothing romantic about it, just two people who had shared something meaningful and knew that the time had come to move on. As I walked out of her house that evening, I felt a sense of finality, but also a strange peace. It wasn't an ending I expected, but it was one I could live with. We had decided to keep our secrets safe, hidden from the world, and we were both okay with it. The last glance I gave her before I got in my car said everything. There was no need for words. We understood each other. What we had, what we shared, it was ours, and it would always stay that way. I drove away, my heart a little lighter, knowing that this was the way it had to be. We had chosen our path, and in some strange way, it was the right one. Our secret would remain safe, and that was enough. It's been about 7 months since everything between us started. 7 months since I walked into her house that day when everything changed. I've been thinking about that time a lot, more than I'd like to admit. But it's all part of the story now, isn't it? We're not in the same place we were back then. But I guess that's how life works. Nothing stays the same forever, especially when you're keeping secrets. I've spent the last few months reflecting on it all. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of the situation. But looking back now, I understand it better. The secret we shared, it wasn't meant to last. Maybe it wasn't supposed to. That's how I feel about it now, and honestly, I'm okay with it. For the first few months, it felt like we had something that no one else could touch. We met in secret, shared moments no one else could know about. There was a thrill in it, in the secrecy, in the quiet moments we shared when no one was watching. But slowly, things began to change. The excitement started to fade, and the weight of the secret began to feel heavier. It wasn't just about keeping the truth hidden anymore. It was about the strain it put on both of us. We started to drift in ways I couldn't explain at first. We stopped talking as much, and when we did, it felt forced. The connection we had once felt so strong was fraying at the edges, and neither of us knew how to fix it. One night, it all came to a head. I remember the argument like it was yesterday. It was the kind of conversation that spirals out of control without anyone intending it to. We were both frustrated, but neither of us knew how to express it. We were both tired of pretending that everything was okay, tired of hiding something that was no longer working for either of us. "I don't know what you want from me anymore, Nick," she said, her voice sharp. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like this is okay." And I didn't have an answer for her. I didn't know what I wanted either. For the first time, I realized that maybe what we had wasn't meant to last forever. We had shared something real, something unique, but it wasn't the kind of relationship that could survive the weight of our own expectations. "We can't keep doing this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it was enough. The words hung in the air between us, and there was no going back after that. We spent a long time that night talking about everything, about what we'd shared, what we'd lost, and what we wanted moving forward. But in the end, there's only one thing left to say: maybe it's time to let go. So we did. We agreed that we had reached the end of the road. It was over, and we both knew it. Looking back, it's hard to say if I regret any of it. It wasn't a perfect story, and it certainly wasn't the kind of relationship that most people would understand. But it was real, and for a time, it was enough. I don't feel any bitterness or anger now. If anything, I'm just grateful for the moments we share, for the connection that we had, however fleeting it was. It's been 5 months since we made that decision. We haven't spoken since that night. I still think about her, sometimes about how things were about the way we felt. But I don't regret anything. We both walked away from it with something, even if it wasn't the ending we thought we'd get. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm not sure if I'll ever see her again. But for now, I'm content with how things ended. We made our choices, and in the end, we both moved on. And honestly, I'm okay with that.